process of defining culture is a tricky one. Everyone defines it differently. The word itself is not so much an absolute as it is a loose framework designed for an individual to attach their own familial experiences as well as their own social observations. It's a subjective subject. But one thing remains clear about the concept of defining culture. It is integral to the way we view ourselves and others. The book even says that how we think about culture frames our ideas and our perceptions, meaning that even if we aren't consciously observing the cultures of ourselves and the people around us, it is still affecting us subconsciously.
The word means something different to everyone, but for the purposes of this video, we have decided to take the easy way out and define culture by its dictionary definition: the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. Culture is a complex and dynamic concept, and if we wish to understand it on a conscious level, we must first acquire historical contextual information to put it all into perspective.
Texas is without a doubt one of the most culturally rich and diverse states in America. Its lore and ethos expand not only to the corners of our country, but to the rest of the world as well. Talk to anyone outside of the Lone Star State, someone who has never been to or known someone from Texas, and they can still probably tell you a decent list of all the iconography that has been generally associated with our state. The question we want to answer within this presentation, though, is how much of this iconography or culture is uniquely Texan and not simply derived from or shared with Mexico? Where is the line of Texican culture?
For starters, when people outside of North America are asked to name a distinctly Texan occupation, most of them would probably say cowboy. The Texas cowboy, however, was completely derived from the Mexican vaquero, or cattle herder. Without their example, Texas could be a largely different state. One of the strongest traditions in Texas is that of the cattle frontier, a tradition that could not have been possible without the cowboy and ultimately the Mexican vaquero.
The cowboy is the American version of the vaquero, which is exactly what they were doing before. They Americanized the character and not really the trait, because being a vaquero it was a trait. I mean, they don't only got the land, but also they got the animals, and when they have the land and they got the animals, they got the control. And most of the time, the people who gets the control is the people who makes the rules, and who gets the names. So now even the Mexican vaqueros are called cowboys. And a lot of the things that they do in Mexico, they do it with the American name.
Texans have idolized the heroic cowboy since his conception. Even today, many Texans still wear cowboy hats, cowboy boots, and even cheer for their favorite competitors at rodeos. As such, the typical Texas depiction of a cowboy is that of a white, burly, uber-masculine man. This depiction is deceptive, though, as even after American media anglicized the vaquero into the cowboy, the job was nevertheless that of unskilled labor, and subsequently, most cowboy positions were still largely held by Mexican and African Americans. So, one of the most endearing flagship cultural traits Texas lays claim to owes its existence to a Mexican tradition.
Speaking of traditions, food is often a go-to when it comes to getting an idea of a region's cultural impact. Mexico's impact on American cuisine is obvious, to say the least. Specifically, the Southwest has been influenced the most thanks to the states being more closely tied to the Mexican border.
There's a lot of immigrants. When an immigrant goes to a place, they bring their own culture. They bring their own food, the way they speak, the way they work, they dress. When the Mexicans come here, they start speaking English and they start eating the food and everything that is created here. But that doesn't mean that they leave behind what they're used to. If you go to a Hispanic family, I mean, probably they'll be cooking the way their grandparents and the great-grandparents were cooking.
After America's acclamation of Texas, Mexican food had consequently become popular in the United States. However, though the food always maintained an obvious link to its Latin source, many of the dishes altered in style and form to fit the palates of the new American consumer.
The new midpoint of international cuisine became known as Tex-Mex, one of the most popular types of food in the United States. Tex-Mex is famous for its blend of Mexican and American influences, combining Latin tradition with Texan taste. For example, when it came to making tortillas, Texas took on the wheat flour tradition its neighboring border towns utilized instead of using the corn flour techniques that were commonplace in the inner regions of Mexico. Texas also adapted the Mexican chili pepper into a powder that became a staple of perhaps one of the most popular Tex-Mex co-opted dishes, chili con carne. Last but definitely not least, Tex-Mex introduced the combination plate to the world, a dish comprised of multiple tortilla and bean-based entrees surrounded by rice and beans.
Though Texas is known for other great non-Mexican culinary mainstays, like Texas toast and Texas barbecue, Tex-Mex is arguably the most unique and famous type of cooking to emerge from and be unique to the Lone Star State. This fact once again solidifies the notion that Mexico's importance in the Texas artistic ether is an overt one.
Speaking of overt art, it is hard to deny the cultural significance of unique architecture, and Texas is packed with it. Texas regionalism allowed for a shift from European Victorian designs and architecture. The Texas transition into the maturity of Texas regionalism allowed scholars to research 20th century architecture in Texas and understand what it stemmed from.
Looking at the origins of Texas architecture brought scholars to the study of traditional Mexican buildings, where the stylistic influence is derived. In places like San Antonio, many architectural styles, other than large metropolitan buildings and other modern designs, are closely tied to traditional Mexican construction.
It is also very pertinent to remember the Alamo. The Alamo, which is arguably the most famous building in all of Texas, was originally a Spanish Roman Catholic mission that became secularized and eventually housed the Mexican army group, the 2nd Flying Company of San Carlos de Parras, who are thought to have named the Alamo in the first place.
Perhaps because of the Alamo, since 1877, San Antonio has been known as the focal point of Mexican culture in the United States. The city obtained its cultural stronghold in a variety of ways, and is even said to be responsible for the spread of the Mexican culture across the country. Due, for the most part, to the Mexican Revolution, there was a large influx of Mexican families into Texas, and many of them resided in San Antonio or other neighboring counties.
A lot of people with power, very good, intelligent, hardworking people came. About 700,000 people run out of Mexico, and they came here to the United States. And a lot of these people, they were doctors, they were attorneys, doctors, business owners, politicians. So they were very smart people that they were controlling Mexico, and they have a lot of properties. But if they would have stayed there, they would have gotten killed. So they had to run. And where do they run? They run over here. They came to the United States, and especially to Texas. And so when you bring that kind of brain power to a place, that people didn't create any conflict here. They really revolutionized this place. And that begins the Latinization of the United States, but in a positive way. And yes, there were a lot of poor people that also they were getting killed, and they came and they worked the land, but also there was nobody working the land. And so guess what? We eat every day.
This caused the exploitation of their cheap labor to become largely common in Texas, and even across the country. San Antonio also drew in many tourists because of their food and music. The city still remains the focal point of Mexican culture in the U.S. However, other cities in California and Arizona have begun catching up. So, even if San Antonio eventually becomes overshadowed by the growth in other cities, it can still be known as one of the biggest factors for Mexican cultural expansion in Texas and the United States. This fact, yet again, proves how ingrained Mexican identity is within the state.
In conclusion, based on our research, it is apparent that much of Texas culture has been adapted from Mexico. This cultural adaptation has reflected our already discussed factors behind the concept of culture. The historical context behind today's Texan philosophy indicates that the Mexican Revolution is largely responsible for the mass exodus of Mexican families into the United States, specifically Texas. Even the most culturally identifiable Texan occupation, the cowboy, has been derived from Mexican tradition. Research provided the origins of the cowboy and how the Mexican vaqueros allowed for his conception and subsequent romanticism throughout Texas.
Research of other factors like cuisine, Tex-Mex, and architecture also revealed just how much Texas has drawn inspiration from and continues the traditions of Mexico through other cultural mediums. But there are several limitations to our research. First, Tex-Mex is not the only food that emerged from Texas. There are many different types of grilling styles in Texas, many influenced by ethnic cultures other than Mexican. Thus, we cannot fully say that Texas food is a complete adaptation of Mexican culture. Second, art and architecture are arbitrarily interpreted. For example, our research explained the significance of studying a culture to better interpret their art design. The problem here is that many artists were influenced by many cultures, and we cannot say if an interpretation is correct since each cultural interpretation is highly subjective and would most likely have its own bias.
Even with the acknowledgement of the previously stated limitations to our research, our argument of the line of Texican culture is still supported heavily. Without the cultural influences of Mexico, be it fiestas, the Alamo, the food, the architecture, the cowboy, or countless other iconography, Texas would not look anywhere near the same as it does today. Thank you for your time.